Yellowstone supervolcano. Will the Idaho magnitude 6.5 earthquake trigger a Yellowstone eruption? It's shaken the whole area, and we've already seen that it's shaken all the way down to San Francisco, perhaps even Los Angeles. It definitely has shaken Seattle and Manitoba, Alberta of Canada. And we've also seen in the video before this one, you'll see where we have deformation. North, it's going basically southwest, and it has been inflating in the area of Hebgen Lake. And that's where we had the 1959 7.3 earthquake, whereas the Yellowstone Lake is deflating. So there's a lot of weird movement there, deformation from, according to the geodesy GPS movements that we've seen. But what about the earthquake there? The earthquake swarms are still going, by the way. And this is the third largest surprising earthquake in the area. The first one was 5.7 in Salt Lake City, and we're still having quake swarms there. Then we have the 5 magnitude in northwest Texas, and we're still having earthquake swarms there. And then we had the 6.5 in Idaho, in an area near just northeast of Boise, Idaho, and it's about 190 miles from the caldera, even less, because I took Hebgen Lake now as a starting point. So the quake swarms there are still going. We've also seen that we have the mantle plume coming from source of Baja California. It splits into a Y. The western area branch goes into San Andreas and the Walker Lane Fault System, which has the high threat volcanoes of California. And the eastern arm goes from Baja up to through Utah into Yellowstone. And that's the mantle plume that feeds the magma to Yellowstone. And that magma is surfacing there. And it's right under Yellowstone. And of course, it's also under Utah and Idaho, as we saw. And we saw that Idaho has 9 volcanoes. Utah has 8. The youngest to erupt in Utah, south of Salt Lake, was 660 years ago. The geologists have warned us that Idaho is due for a major earthquake eruption of these volcanoes, the craters of the moon volcanoes in Idaho that erupt every 3,000 years, like clockwork, quote-unquote clockwork, and it erupted 2,100 years ago. So in about 1,000 years, they expect it will erupt again. But the bad thing is that those eruptions last for hundreds of years or thousands of years, what they said. It's amazing. I mean, that's unbelievable. But this is what the geologists have found. Now, what about the 6.5 earthquake, and how will that affect Yellowstone, which is the second largest supervolcano in the world? And many are having questions about this. What's going to happen to Yellowstone? As we know, the geologists in the past have told us not to worry, but what they are worried about is a nearby large earthquake, because the supervolcanoes are not like regular volcanoes. They have bigger magma chambers, meaning that the roof of the magma chamber is more spread out. And a large earthquake, of course, could crack it, and that's bad. That would be bad news. And you could imagine. So after this earthquake, the social media was lit with comments and questions: is Yellowstone about to blow? And some say that's way too near Yellowstone. 6.5 is way too near Yellowstone. As we saw, it is. It did shake Yellowstone. And is it okay to panic yet or not, they say. But geologists have moved to calm fears, and they say that the supervolcano is not about to blow. And they say that earthquakes don't trigger eruptions, they don't trigger volcanic activity. Okay, well, look, I beg to differ. Now they're changing their course, because that's not what they were explaining to us before. We did see that the White Island volcano of the North Island of New Zealand had quake swarms before that erupted, and that was hydrothermal eruption because of the water accumulating underneath was superheated and had to escape somehow. That's what happened there. But they say here, the earthquakes can trigger changes in the geyser behavior. So what's probably happening is that the shallow conduits that feed the hot springs and the geysers are sort of broken up by the shaking, and that causes the hot water to find other ways to come out. You see what happens? It can change the behavior of the geysers, the hydrothermal system, because of the structure underneath, the sediment underneath could be changing, and the roots of the water could be changing, and they may find other ways to erupt somewhere else than where they have been erupting. Now, according to U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, the chances of a Yellowstone eruption is around 1 in 730,000, with 640,000 years having passed since the last major eruption, the super eruption. Yellowstone is edging closer to an eruption, but it could still be thousands of years away, they said. And here they're talking about a super eruption. But we know that 70,000 years ago, Yellowstone erupted with a lava eruption, and it had another 80 eruptions since that 70,000 year ago eruption. Another 80 eruptions. Now, the experts are preparing for the worst now. They're studying how a major eruption could instantly wipe out large swaths of the U.S., and how can that be prevented? One NASA employee in the recent past, believes he found a unique way, and his answer to stop the major eruption would be by feeding cold water into Yellowstone's magma chambers, basically a geothermal plant, like we have in Long Valley caldera supervolcano, like we have at the geysers, like we have at Ridgecrest, Casa volcanic field, like we have at Salton Sea. Now, around 60 to 70% of the heat generated by Yellowstone seeps into the atmosphere, but the remainder builds up inside, they said. And if enough builds up of this heat and energy, it can trigger an eruption. So that's why this NASA scientist wanted to have this idea. He says by drilling 6 miles down into Yellowstone, which is basically, we said before that the top of the magma chamber is 3 miles down. If you're standing, around Old Faithful or the geysers there, 3 miles down is the roof of the magma chamber. He says by drilling 6 miles into Yellowstone, he believes that it would be possible to pump high-pressure water, which will allow the cool liquid to absorb some of the heat from down there before it's pumped back out again. And this is Mr. Wilcox told journalist Brian Walsh in the latter's new book, End Times. The plan could cost about $3.5 billion, and this proposal would have the benefit of using the steam from the hot water coming out of Yellowstone and magma combo to create the carbon-free geothermal electricity. In other words, a geothermal plant at a much cheaper rate than any alternative energy currently available on the market, he says. Mr. Wilcox said that things that make Yellowstone a force of nature is that it stores up heat for hundreds of thousands of years before it all goes kablooey all at once, and it would be good if we drain away that heat before it could do a lot of damage. Now, of course, we know that Michael Pollan is in charge. He's the geologist in charge of Yellowstone. He's the man that gives us the updates on Yellowstone Volcano every week on the basically in the Yellowstone Caldera Chronicles. And he says that no one, as long as he is in charge of Yellowstone, is going to touch Yellowstone whatsoever, because that would be a risk. If you do something wrong, you may just bring about what you're trying to forego. In other words, an eruption, which would be devastating, of course. So we wait and see, and hopefully, it will only be geysers that have some changes. Sean Martin, Express UK on this. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events. events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.